Hello and welcome back to Now You Know with Peninsula Area Public Access. I'm Dale Wilson. Our guest today is Commissioner Mike Chapman. Commissioner Mike Chapman is running for the State House, position 1 for the House of Representatives, and we're fortunate to have him in studio today to tell us a little bit about himself and what he intends to do once he makes it to the big house, the State House. What do I mean, the big house?
Exactly. Is that a...
Commissioner, you've been a county commissioner in Clallam County for the last 16 years, and a lot of good and not so good commissioners have come and gone during that time. Most of that time I was not here, so I'm just getting that on what I've heard. Tell us about some of the more memorable characters with whom you've served, not only on the county commission, but those whom you met in where the job took you to wider areas.
Oh my gosh, I've never been asked that question. That's a really, well, this is not a political answer, but it'll sound like it. Anybody who runs for office and wins is a memorable character in the own right.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in a positive way, and it does. I have great respect for everyone who runs and wins in a local election or any election for that matter. It does take a lot of commitment and effort, and you have to give them great credit. And so I have anybody who's running, I have great respect. Even people that have run against me in some of my contested campaigns. We've always ended up at the end of the campaign with great respect for one another. There's always that moment where you're maybe the last debate or something and you wish each other best on election day.
Early on, the early days of your being in office, did you have mentors either in the county or from other counties that you may have met people?
No, that's interesting. I actually, my wife and I talked about that in the first few months of my office as a commissioner. In law enforcement, you have the academy, and so you're completely kind of sheltered and protected in the academy, and that you're not actually enforcing the law, but you're learning all about it. Then when you come out of the academy, you have what's called a field training officer, of which I had been under one. I had been a field training officer, and so I was really familiar with that model of a mentor and a model of kind of, hey kid, here's how here's what you can do, here's what you don't do. This, I know they said this in the academy, but on the street, this is really how it's going to work, and just that mentoring. As an elected official, there's really no mentor, and maybe in other boards, and maybe if I'm fortunate enough to be elected to the State House, it's a little different, but because of the Open Public Meetings Act, and because the Board of Commissioners is 3 people, there's no mentoring allowed, because you can't talk to one another about business, about the job, except in a public meeting. And that would be really awkward for a senior board member to mentor a junior board member in a public meeting. That would come across as kind of patronizing maybe. So I think there has to just be a sense of patience in that if there are new board members, and I've now served with long enough at the county level that a number of new board members have come in. You just have to be patient and let them ask questions that you yourself a long time ago kind of figured out. And what I found is I'm trying to, like this year's board, I'm in my 16th year, and this is an awkward dynamic because I have Commissioner Peach is just starting his 2nd year, and Commissioner Ozias is now, at the time of this taping, just finishing up his 4th month. So my role as the chair, what I have tried to do, and I think some days I've been more successful than others, some days I probably have still jumped in a little bit too much, but I'm really trying to give both of them, lots of room to ask questions. Even though I could probably say, hey, X, Y, and Z, this is kind of how we've always done it, or I'm just trying to, and I really am trying to have both of them get their questions answered. So that's maybe my role of mentoring them, but I can't say, hey, Mark or Bill, you might want to go talk to this person, they'll have the answers. So I just kind of let them to have that dialogue.
It's been my perception that you are either consciously or unconsciously moving Mark out to the front a little bit, giving him more responsibility, more opportunities, and I think he's doing a great job. He's come along great.
It's interesting. My first 11 years, I was in my 3rd year of my 3rd term, and I was still the junior member of the Board of Commissioners. We had a great board for 12 years. Commissioner Mike Doherty, Commissioner Steve Theringer, who's now a state representative, and myself. I think that if you could pull the records, you'd be hard pressed to find a county commissioner in the state in the last 30 years who was in their 11th year who was still the junior member. So that shows the long tradition. Now we have a different dynamic, and yes, where I had 11 years to be prepared maybe to move up in ranks, We know that next year Bill and Mark are going to be moving right up, and Bill in his third year next year will be the senior member, and Mark in his second year will be the next senior member.
That's a little scary.
So, so I am a couple of things. Commissioners serve on the canvassing board for elections, and I have really served on the canvassing board probably more than most commissioners in my time. It's just something I've been interested in, and unless you're on the ballot, I've traditionally done that. Well, I realized I just did the first election this year for the school bond, the SQUIM school bond, but then I was looking at the calendar and it dawned on me, hey, these guys gotta serve on the canvassing board the rest of this year. Certainly in the primary and the general I wouldn't have been allowed to anyway, but at the presidential primary now, Mark's gonna serve on the canvassing board. They need some of that experience. And so yes, some of these issues, it is better for me to kind of back away and let them kind of work through. As chair, I'm not making motions unless I absolutely have to. I've only, tried not to second motions, which is a traditional role. I'm also trying to let them kind of have the conversation between the two of them, and if they can listen to one another and respect one another, which they are, then the county's going to be well served as a third new member joins a very young board next year.
Commissioner, what are some of the major challenges facing the county right now?
Well, it's going to be budget moving forward, but we're now in an interesting dynamic. When we went through, and I've served on the Board of Commissioners through two recessions. We had the recession after 9/11, and then we had the Great Recession. And so during those periods, you have kind of a contraction of public services because you have a contraction of income, revenue. It's not income, but revenue, tax revenue. And the public accepted that during those recessions. And now that the economy is improving, the challenge is our revenue still doesn't expand as fast as the demand for services. So we're in a really interesting, for the first time in a long time, the public is actually asking for more services, more expenditures, more money being, SARC is a recent example, a fairly large grant to reopen the SQUIM Aquatic Recreation Center with a partnership of the YMCA. Other community groups are coming forward and saying, hey, can the county be a partner? So that's a change, because many times the county has been seen as just delivering core services, which we have to do, roads, law and justice, the courts, public health. Those are your, and then the core offices in the courthouse. But it is, so that's going to be a dynamic for the commissioners going forward. It's going to be an interesting challenge to continue to meet the needs of the community that are now coming forward. The community is asking more from its local government with no new revenue. Though there's healthy reserves, there's a reason to keep a certain level of those reserves, and so that's going to be that challenge as to how much of these community requests can the board meet versus without an expanding economy quicker than what we're seeing. The revenue has been and will stay relatively flat.
Speaking of an expanding, yes. Speaking of an expanding economy, and my concern is what seems like a great deal of difficulty to get family wage supportive jobs here. And you may have heard of a report that was delivered to the Economic Development Council when Bill Greenwood, the new executive director, came in. He suggested going back to his Rolodex, that he's been in business in mergers and acquisitions for years. He suggested going to his Rolodex and attempting to find some companies that might spin off a part of their companies up here, or maybe move their companies up here. And immediately, one of your former county commissioners, Mr. McIntyre, told him, "Now wait, you've got to be careful what kind of jobs you bring up here, because if they pay more than the local people pay, they'll come after your employees." Now, to me, that philosophy will keep us into low-wage jobs for the rest of our days, and that is the type of thinking that got the EDC $300,000 last year, and maybe another $300,000 this year. When it seems like to me that they're not creating, they are the chosen ones to create the jobs here, or to be the engine for job creation. Are you satisfied with your investment with the EDC and their attempts at job creation?
Well, for this, yes and no. This year, for the first time, we put in the contract performance measures, and that was a great step. And so now we're going to be marking those performance measures as we go along. So we don't know the full story. For many years, the county funded the EDC and at different funding levels, and we had a basic contract. Now the board has raised the bar, and we're gonna follow that.
Give me their top 10 successes for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
No, maybe two.
Yeah.
Two successes. in their chosen role as the job-creating engine for Clallam County.
Let me put it another way, if I can. You can't probably look at right off the top of my hand and say, well, they were responsible for this many jobs with this company. But I will say that we as a community, two things. You always want competition, so if there are more jobs here, we know our wages will rise. That's going to be a positive thing. That happens across America. So the more jobs we have, and we're beginning to see just a tiny little bit of wage inflation because the unemployment rate is dropping. Well, we don't do a good enough job, and as a community, many times we have always said, well, we need this company to move here, or we need these jobs to move here, or we need this. And it would all be nice, and if it materializes, those are great jobs. But you know what we don't do, Dale? I don't think, in economic development, is we don't celebrate the jobs that we have here today. And we don't do enough good work of promoting the jobs that we have here and the companies that have employed. You know, there are companies in this community that have employed individuals for 10 and 20 and 30 years through recessions, through 9/11, through economic hardship. I have a very good friend who's worked for a local merchant, over 30 years, one job. It's a union job.
Great.
He's raised a family. He's bought a house. He's bought multiple cars. I know there are people at the local car dealerships that have worked there. What we need to do, and what I would like to see more of, is reaching out to those local businesses that are thriving here, and that may be one of the changes that we're seeing in the EDC for the first time, because this wasn't a strong point. Reaching out to those local businesses to find out, how can we support you be more successful? How can we support you in your business? And what do you need? And more of a listening tour with those local businesses. And now for the first time, anecdotally, but it's a good sign, we're seeing more businesses wanting to be associated with the EDC, because I feel like those businesses are feeling like they're being validated for being the business here instead of, and I have talked to enough people to say, it's great when government, everybody says we want to attract X, Y, or Z here, but they often felt like, but we're here now, and our workers are here, and many of us, many businesses have poured their life, their hard work, and they have employed people who have raised their kids, voted for school bonds, buy the houses, buy the cars, and so that, to me, is one of the most positive changes that I see coming out of the EDC, is that partnership with local businesses.
Here's what
You
I
may
don't
disagree
understand.
with that, but
I
that's a change.
I agree with everything you said. But here's one of the conflicts that comes out of the EDC. Most businessmen, especially most conservative businessmen, will suggest that government needs to step out of the way and let us do our job and pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps.
I've heard that once or twice.
But right now, the taxpayer money is still supporting at least 50%, maybe more, of the EDC budget. Now, how does that square with all of these major corporations that you see on the full color page in the newspaper? Why do they still need taxpayer money when they have capital that probably exceeds that of the county?
The goal is that they won't at some point. And this is a transition period. If the county had literally just pulled its funding, the organization would have ceased to exist. And I feel like what they're doing to promote and support local businesses is a worthy investment right now. It is not probably. I think in the next year or two, boards of commissioners will have to make that decision as to what funding level. I'm encouraged because I like the emphasis that the EDC is making on supporting and promoting and being a partner with local businesses. To me, that's the biggest change that I see. Time will tell if that was a worthy investment. Time will also tell that if we just pulled, it's true that if we had just pulled our funding, the EDC would cease to exist. And then we're kind of waving the white flag, possibly. I would view that as waving the white flag on economic development in this county. And so I think there is this public-private partnership. At what funding level? Right now, it's $150,000 that we funded it this year with performance measures for the first time, with metrics, with quarterly updates from the EDC. So we're going to see through this year what next year's board, how they want to move forward. That'll be an interesting decision. I think many people have a lot of questions. I think people that are running for county commissioner this year are going to raise questions. But we need to be careful not to just wave the white flag and say no EDC, no economic development, because then that sends a wrong message too. And if we can partner with our local businesses,
I think
that
I
can
hear
be a
you saying as long
positive.
as we're throwing money at a problem, we can be considered solving the problem.
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't think you ever just throw money at a problem. What I'm saying is, in previous years, there was no strategy that was supporting, that I saw supportive of local businesses. And this under this new contract.
But they were
and
funded
this-
every year during that time.
They were, sure. For a couple decades. I mean, for a decade and a half, we've been funding the EDC. We're more than a decade and a half.
35 years, I think, or
Yeah, I
or
mean,
more.
but to a fairly robust level has been most of the time that I've been on the county commission.
I'm not being facetious at all. In the 35 years, what can you offer as a success of the EDC?
Well, depending on how you measure success, I measure success, and like I said, in the businesses that have been here and have thrived.
I'm going by that core mission of creating
Right,
jobs.
Right. Well, what you don't know is what jobs wouldn't have been created if there hadn't been an EDC. We don't know what our economic picture would look like without an EDC, and we don't know that, again, do you want to be the community, one of the only communities in the state of Washington that basically walks away from economic development as a
Well,
strategy?
no. I'm not
and as a
suggesting.
partnership?
I'm not suggesting walking away from economic development. I am suggesting investing where there is real return on investment. And the other thing, in this particular area, we have the Port of Port Angeles, who see themselves as the job-creating engine, and then you have the Economic Development Council, who sees themselves as the job, and yet neither one of them are actually creating the jobs, the family wage jobs that are needed. Is there a way to, and of course you're going to be gone if this ever comes to pass, hopefully to higher office, but you may.
Some may disagree with that, but
Is there a way for these people to coordinate their efforts, or friendly competition, or something to where, with all the money that we're spending on economic development, to actually have family wage supportive jobs?
If you remember last year, we actually had that conversation, and the Board of Commissioners met with the Port Commissioners as to whether the role of an Economic Development Council, it's really, it's called the Authorized Development Organization that we've authorized the EDC to be. Should we partner with the Port? And should there be more of a county-port partnership surrounding economic development?
Commissioner, hold that thought. We're going to
We're
take
gonna
a
have to go
break,
to a
and we'll be
You
right
have to
back.
pay some bills.
Exactly. We'll be right back with more with County Commissioner Mike Chapman, and thanks for watching Peninsula Area Public Access. I'm Dale Wilson. Hello and welcome back to Now You Know. I'm Dale Wilson, and our guest today is Commissioner Mike Chapman. Commissioner Chapman, presently there are discussions around the courthouse about performance evaluation for the county administrator. In fact, I think you've even brought in a facilitator to help with that. Tell us about that process and what's going on. I mean, I know that you can't get into personnel matters, but this may be the first time that you've had this?
Yeah, the first time in my time that we've had a professional come in and facilitate a performance evaluation. Look, performance evaluations are a necessary part of every job. When I was in law enforcement, it was mandated every year that you would meet with the chief and the sergeants, and you'd have a performance evaluation. So I'm a very strong proponent. Because boards of commissioners, we're a 3-member board and not everyone comes from the same background. I think over the years it was kind of more aligned of each individual commissioner would just give feedback to the administrator. There have been a couple more formal processes, but generally I think in that kind of a role, if the board's not looking to make a change, then probably the administrator felt like he was doing a good job. In this case, and I was actually one of the driving forces in saying, hey, I think we should have a more formal process. Primarily, not so much of what their job performance had been in the past, although I think that there was some information that could come out and can help. But I really did, again, with 2 new commissioners, I wanted them, 2 things really kind of bothered me. I wanted them to have a say in what they expect of the administrator, because they are inheriting an individual who's been there long before they were elected, working under a contract that they didn't sign, working under a job description that they didn't approve. And so I wanted them to begin to have some ownership in that key position. It's a charter mandated position. The charter, the Clallam County Charter, which is like our Constitution, it doesn't say the Board of Commissioners may employ an administrator. We actually have to employ an administrator. We have to have that position. And it's the only position that the Board of Commissioners hires or fires other than the hearing examiner. They're the two charter positions that the Board of Commissioners directly oversees. Many people don't realize that. They probably think that we can hire and fire all kinds of people, and we can't.
Order everybody around.
Right, exactly. So I thought it was important for two new commissioners to begin to get some ownership and to evaluate what they had heard maybe on the campaign trail, or certainly in Bill's case that he had kind of observed over the last year. And I wanted them to work together, and I wanted them to, I thought, a professional evaluator. What I would really, if I were running for re-election to the county commission, what I would be saying and what I would offer is that I would think would be a great idea is that really by early next year, a new contract should be proposed that the new board next year signs. Because at the end of this year, the administrator will be working with a job description and a contract that will have been signed by, as of January 1, nobody who's in office if that's not amended. So I think that's a process that they need to start to go through. Mark and Bill. The other thing that I think would be really good is to bring in this facilitator and to really begin to do a strategic plan among the whole county operation. Bring in all the elected officials, all the department heads.
So is that not happening this year? Will they not bring in the other elected officials to weigh in?
Not this year. It doesn't look like that was...
Commissioner,
yeah.
You're missing a great opportunity because,
we are.
as you say, this is the first time, and because of your wealth of experience that you've already amassed on the county commissioners, you could give it some great direction because, well, let me be quite frank with you. There is a climate of fear around the courthouse, especially with some of the elected people. There is a belief that they have to behave so-and-so or they won't get all the personnel that they need. There's a belief that they can't speak out on issues because they feel that there will be recriminations. Now, I'm not saying that any of that is true, but I'm saying that there is a belief that those things happen. And while you have a professional facilitator here, why not get all the elected people in the room and let them give real protected feedback on the job evaluation that you're going to be responsible for going forward? And
actually, I supported that, and I encouraged the board. Right now, that doesn't appear, as of this taping, that doesn't appear that that's, looks like just a majority of the board just wanted to kind of have this evaluation, kind of move through the rest of this year. There's also a wisdom in waiting until the third that you'll have a relatively new board, and I really hope they tackle that in the first part of next year to begin to have a new strategic plan. I'm not so sure that with my length of time there, that what I would bring, and there is some wisdom in possibly waiting for the election to occur this fall and have a new board come in, and then have the new board make a decision as to what process they want to go forward. So, but I would have supported a more robust process this year, and maybe we can still talk about it as a board. There's only so many hours in the day, and I think it's difficult for new board members to take on some of these issues that are so complicated and that sort of thing. So,
which is why I think it's so important with your longevity there that you would provide the leadership, because you know more of as they say, more of where all the bodies are buried.
Well,
so, and these two, Mark and Bill, that are relatively new to the Board of Commissioners, and they wouldn't have nearly as much experience in dealing with the county administrator. So it just seems like it would be a great opportunity for the people at the other electeds at the courthouse to be able to air any grievances that they may have. And you may go into these meetings and say, he's great, no problems. Or you may go in there and find some real issues that need to be dealt with by the current commissioners who have the longest tenure at this position.
Tenure is an interesting thing. It can you do have some experience, but there's also a sense that look, I knew in my heart that running for a fifth term was not the right thing for the organization. Turnover at the top is always good. Self-term limiting myself out of the county was a good decision. I think it'll be a really good process for the next board. The last time we went through that process was the last time you had a board of commissioners where one was in their starting their third year, one was starting their second year, and I was coming on brand new. We went through that in my first year in office. We also, within a number of months, the administrator who had worked for a board for many years moved on, and a new administrator came on board. That's just kind of the evolution and the process. These things take a little bit of time. I don't think there's quite I don't think it's quite the same spirit of, as you put it, a spirit of fear. I think this board has been very open this year, very transparent, very welcoming. We had a joint board of commissioners elected department head meeting at the start of the year. We're going to have another one to go over the mid-year budget review. We have more participation in our department head and elected official meetings, from what I understand, and because I think there's just an openness. I think the new board members that have come in the last couple of years have really embraced a philosophy. It's my philosophy. I've always had an open door philosophy. I've always been welcomed and approached, and have had great relationships with many elected officials. I added it up the other day. I've worked with 34 different elected officials in my time at the county. And I can tell you, every one, those relationships, some were incredibly close, some were much more, not close like just friendship close, and others have been more not so, and then some, not everyone has liked me. I realize that.
Let me circle back just for a second. I do not accuse that there's a climate of fear. I know that there are people who feel like that. So I don't have any knowledge of it, but I know that there are people who are concerned, and elected officials in the court, at least two in the courthouse. Let me move on for a second.
I don't want to let anybody think that I'm by any stretch the board's minimizing that. I think we're aware, we're listening. I think that, in all fairness, it is like I said. I hope they embark on that more strategic planning process at the first part of next year.
All right, to get close to wrapping things up here, you're going to be in the state legislature next year. What are some concerns?
I don't know about that. I'm asking.
Assuming.
I never look.
What are some concerns that you want to bring to the legislature, and what would you like to see done in the first year?
Well, and I am running for the state legislature, and if I'm elected, the legislature is going to have some. You'd think the county's had some tough challenges. They're operating under a court mandate to fully fund education. And that's about $3.5 billion over a biennium. That's a lot of money, and that's going to be the work that the legislature is going to have to tackle.
Aren't they presently in contempt?
They are. $100,000 a day they're being fined. This previous legislature that just ended, in their how many candidates I can say in their wisdom, but I understand. They passed a law that says that next year's legislature will bring the state into compliance with the McCleary decision. I had already kind of thought about running before they passed that law, and I may have rethought my decision.
That's a great idea. Pass a law that everything will come into compliance in the county, but when you leave.
Exactly. I thought that. Maybe what am I thinking? Why don't I do that? So anyway, in all seriousness, that's going to be a huge challenge. We're going to have to work together. It's going to have to be a bipartisan solution, because there's just not enough majorities in either house to have one party make that decision. A couple of things that are important, a couple of things that I've looked at and said, I think that was wrong. You look at some of the corporate tax cuts that have occurred, and I'll take Boeing, for example. We extended, the legislature, we as a state extended Boeing's tax cuts, but we didn't get employment guarantees in place. And what happened is,
South Carolina.
They moved to South Carolina. South Carolina offered Boeing tax cuts. South Carolina required job growth to get those tax cuts. Washington didn't require job maintenance or job growth. So those 4,000 jobs, Boeing's moving 4,000 jobs in the process to South Carolina. I actually just yesterday met with the Boeing machinists. And one of the questions in my campaign for the 24th Legislative District, I had a chance to meet with the Boeing Machinists Union. And in that, one of the things, and I drove all the way over to Seattle to meet with them, and one of the first questions I asked is, why do you care what happens with Boeing machinists? Why do you care that Boeing is moving 4,000 jobs from the Seattle area to South Carolina? And I told them exactly, and I'll tell you exactly why I care. Because those 4,000 jobs, that's 4,000 families that won't be traveling to the North Olympic Peninsula this tourist season. It's 4,000 families that potentially will not be spending money in our shops. staying in our hotel, staying in our bed and breakfast, traveling our highways, visiting our national park, our national forest, visiting our local shops and merchants downtown, getting on the ferry and going to Victoria.
Okay.
So as a representative of the 24th Legislative District, job cuts that may impact other areas of the state are vitally important to an area that depends on those
All right,
families
quick question.
visiting here.
We've got about 30 seconds left. Have you given any thought to the first bill you will introduce for legislation?
No, but I've thought about a lot of bills that I would like to see, and the first and foremost is tax cuts with corporations have to be tied to a metric to maintain employment in the state for me to vote for them.
Great. There you have it. Commissioner Mike Chapman, soon to be Representative Mike Chapman, if he is elected to position 1 for the Washington State Legislature. Commissioner, we really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
out and spending
Yeah,
your time
thank
with
you.
us. I know you've
Thank
got a
you.
baseball game to get to this afternoon.
That's
Your son,
right.
what position does he play?
Well, he plays backup. He's a backup catcher, but he's
My
so-
son was a catcher. Interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to let Commissioner get out here and see his son play baseball this afternoon, and we hope you'll come back and visit with us again for Now You Know at Peninsula Area Public Access. I'm your host, Dale Wilson. Thanks you for watching.